I come from a large family, and family gatherings have always been my favorite experiences, especially the ones that leave you with a family story. So I was 9 years old. My parents took me to the home of my godparents, Mr. and Mrs. Penstein, for the first night of Passover and the great ceremonial dinner, the Seder. And I'm alone in the living room with my cousin Arthur, who is 2 years older than me, and he says, "Want to play a joke on my mom?" Now, Arthur's mother is my Aunt Dorothy. She's a school teacher. She never lets anyone forget that, and it's her mission in life to correct people. And just a few weeks before, I had sent her a birthday card with a carefully composed note. She sent it back with my spelling corrected in red. So yeah, I wanted to play a joke on Aunt Dorothy. What do you have in mind? And he tells me, we're going to make a fart machine. And we proceed to take a little piece of cardboard, make a slit on each side. We find a rubber band and anchor the rubber band to it. We search in Mrs. Penstein's sewing table till we find a nice flat button. Sew that to the rubber band. Twist it tight. Hold on to it. And the plan is to slide it under Aunt Dorothy's bottom so that when she sits down and eventually stands up, that rubber band that has been twisted tight is going to unwhirl itself, and it's going to make a noise that sounds like a fart. So we assemble our fart machine, and finally it's time to start the Seder. I'm sitting next to Arthur. Arthur is next to his mother. And the prayers begin, and we stand and we sit, and we stand and we sit. "Arthur, when are you going to do it? When are you going to do it?" He says, "Shh, not yet." And about an hour into these prayers, Mr. Penstein motions for us to rise. And we stand up, and we're saying the blessing. And I see Arthur's hand holding the fart machine with his finger on that twisted rubber band and button, and it's sliding over to Aunt Dorothy's chair. And now she's beginning to sit down, and her bottom is getting closer and closer, and he's still holding it, he's still holding it. Is he going to make it? And at the last possible nanosecond, he lets go, and Aunt Dorothy is mounted on the machine. And the prayers go on, and we're sitting there. And Mr. Penstein finally motions for us to rise for another blessing over the wine. And I stand up, and Arthur stands up, and Aunt Dorothy unfolds her napkin, blots her lips, folds it up, repositions it on the table, adjusts her wine cup. Is she ever going to stand up? And finally, she braces her hands against the side of the table, pushes, and as she begins to rise, we hear and the dining room is dead silent. And Aunt Dorothy pivots slightly and retrieves the offensive apparatus and dangles it in front of Arthur's face. And I try not to look, but when her eyes reach mine, I can't turn away, and she says, "I am so disappointed in you, Madeline." Oh, and I realize I've embarrassed my parents. I've embarrassed myself in front of my relatives. Oh, and in front of my beloved Mr. Penstein. And I peek in his direction to see how angry or upset he is. And his hand is in front of his face. And he's laughing. And slowly, a ripple of giggles spreads across the whole table. Well, my mother and father are not laughing. And Aunt Dorothy is not laughing. Later that night, we pile into Daddy's car for the trip home across Brooklyn. And my mother says, "That was very rude, Madeline." And I sink into the seat. But as we drive down the street, I can see by the intermittent light of the overhead street lamps that my mother and father are both smiling. Thank you.